Guess who's back? Today we have Jason Wardrop, who has been on the show before, and he is going to be talking to us about a short-term rental that he just bought 6 weeks ago. There are a ton of great nuggets, great takeaways, advice for people getting into their first short-term rental. He talks about taxes and tax advantages of getting into short-term rental, best things, worst things, how to choose a market. There's a lot of great content in here. Be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and if you have any comments for me or Jason, be sure to leave them down in the comment section down below, and we'll be watching and ready to answer them. Anyway, enjoy the show. Welcome back to the channel, Jason. So good to have you.
Thanks for having me back, man.
No, we're super excited. The last video where we were talking, it really popped off. It was my first viral video. It did
Oh yeah.
Not millions of views, but for the channel getting 10, 20, 30 views. That one, I think it got over 200. So obviously the audience is looking for more content from you, which I'm excited that we could talk today.
Me too, man. I'm super excited for this. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, for sure. So for everybody watching, listening in, Jason has an awesome YouTube channel, which we will link here and in the comments down below. So go check that out. You can go follow him there. He also just barely got into the real estate game. Well, I guess you've owned homes before and you've sold homes and kind of moved, but you've gotten into the short-term rental real estate game. And I would love to start picking your brain, learning more about how you chose a market, the best parts of being a host, worst parts of being a host, like everything. So I guess if you could start from just the very, very beginning of how did you choose a market? Because I've been looking and there's so many markets to choose from, and there's like, it's super exciting, but it's also so easy to get distracted. And you're like, okay, well, where am I actually going to double down on and choose a place? Like, how did you go through that process?
Yeah, so I mean, I honestly was all over the place quite a bit, and just like you're saying, and I was like reading the articles of like the top markets of Airbnb and all these short-term rentals. And so I was like, man, we live in Utah, and so during the winters, my wife's like, let's get somewhere warm. And so I was like, man, like Florida would be cool to get a place out there. We were looking at Daytona Beach. There's this place I had my eye on. I was talking with the realtor and all this stuff, and just so randomly, like the close airport that's really small here just announced a direct flight from, it's in Provo, Utah, just south of Salt Lake City, Provo, over to Daytona Beach. So I was like, that'd be sweet to have a direct flight, easy to get to, easy-ish.
That would be way nice. That I think is like a key thing when I think about a market is how can I get to it quickly and easily, and it's not like this huge hassle to book flights and like do everything. So if it's like local airport to local airport, that's sweet.
Totally. Yeah. So that was kind of like my initial thought. And then I kind of like started thinking through the mental gymnastics. And as you know, we've got 2 young kids. Oldest is 4, 2-year-old, and then we're having a newborn next month. And I'm like,
Jada just had her birthday. So
Jada just had her birthday yesterday. So
happy birthday, Jada.
That's right. So anyway, then I started thinking, I was like, man, traveling across the country, even though Daytona Beach is like a good market, I think there's a lot of spring breakers that come there. There's just a lot of people that come there on a consistent basis. I was like, for us to go use it, because that was kind of an idea. Like, that's why I wanted to get into short-term rentals, because I'm like, okay, it's a way to tap into real estate, but then also have like a vacation home that when you're not there, because you're not going to be there most of the time, you could actually produce some income with it, right? And so I was like, man, with young kids, it's a trek getting all the way over to Florida. I don't know how often we'll actually use it. And so that's where, honestly, like I kind of stumbled upon the market that we ended up buying our first place in, which is St. George, Utah. It's like southern Utah. It's about an hour and a half, I think 2 hours away, maybe hour and a half from Las Vegas. So quite a bit warmer, but it's only 4 hours, 3.5 hours from where I live.
Yeah.
And so I was like, throw the kids in the car, pop on down there. It's significantly easier than flying across the country to Daytona Beach. And I just knew. And another thing is, like, I felt like the Daytona Beach market, I've never been there. I don't really know the hot spots. Whereas like St. George, growing up in Utah, like I know people in northern Utah go there quite a bit in the winters. Then even in the summer, it's a hot spot. during the falls, like they have baseball tournaments, tennis tournaments, all this stuff down there. So I just knew like people always go down there, right? And that was like a big thing. That was like, I don't want something that's like just a seasonal property, like just certain times of the year. I want it to be like almost year round. People wanted to visit there.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that I think about a ton, which for people that don't know, Utah is a desert. So there's tons of snow, the best snow on earth, and it's incredible. But also further south, it's hot, it's warm year round. So like in St. George. So that is one thing that I'm like, it scares me about certain seasonal rental or like certain short-term rentals that I look at where I'm like, obviously this will be super hot, like hot in the summer and super hot in the winter, but like the shoulder seasons, it'll be horrible. But
Mhm.
really, there's some locations like St. George that there's always tennis tournaments, baseball tournaments. It's like it's kind of a catch-all. And I guess do they even consider having? Do they have a shoulder season down there? What would that look like?
Yeah. So okay. So our place, October was pretty well booked. November's pretty well booked. Thanksgiving's like a very high nightly rate at our place, and luckily we've got I think 4 or 5 nights of that week that are booked out. But then December is crickets so far. Actually, no, we have one booking one weekend in December. In January, because St. George, it still does get cold in the sense of like it'll get down into like, mid 40s or something like that.
Yeah,
And maybe it'll like dust a little bit of snow, but not really a lot.
yeah,
But usually it's like, so that's what they said. They said usually like December, January is not like a ton of people going down. However, with like New Year's Eve, sometimes people just go down there for fun, just like holidays, all that. But then like February is when it starts picking back up, apparently.
yeah. I actually, now that you say it, I remember when I was in college, I went to a Macklemore concert in St. George, and it was snowing, but it wasn't like that bad. It was an outdoor concert. It was snowing, and it was like actually awesome still. So I guess there's still events that will drive people down there in the slower seasons. But the one thing that you were well, there's two thoughts I have. I was listening on the Bigger Pockets podcast, and they were like, "Hey, I used to be booked out like 4 months, and I knew I was completely booked out, completely full. But people are noticing that they aren't booked out for like the second and the third month out, but it still ends up filling up, almost as if like they're still making the same amount of money that they were making. It just doesn't look like as concrete because people are no longer booking things out so far. I don't know. It's like the COVID effect where people are like, I have to book this out so far. And now, like, potentially December, I mean, based on that logic, potentially December could still fill up, but it just won't fill up till later, either like mid-November, later in the year. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I try to look at it. So we have like we have like a weekend booking like the first week of December. And then we got somebody the other day that booked like a full week in April, which I'm sure they're planning for like spring break, just getting ahead of the curve, right? Um, but obviously we're pretty new at this as far as like bookings. I mean, we've only owned the property, I think, for like 6 weeks now.
Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully we start ramping up some of those bookings and kind of see that inflow coming in.
That's cool. So do you have a property management company that's handling this? Like that's kind of setting the prices? Like how are you doing that as like a newbie to the world?
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I'm not one where I'm not trying to get into vacation rentals as like my full-time gig. This is more of like, okay, how can I like have my investments that I can enjoy, but also kind of creating a little bit of cash flow, right? And
Mhm.
so, we actually found a place that's it because I want to be completely hands off. And so we found a place. There's a few communities down there that the whole communities are just focused on nightly rentals, so vacation homes.
Yep.
And so the community that we bought in, there's about 70 homes, and they're all like circled around this like pool, this resort area. It's got like water slides, lazy rivers, all these fun pools for the kids, a clubhouse, all that cool stuff. And so the basically if you rent out your place, you have to rent it out through their management company, so they take care of it all. It's almost kind of like a glorified hotel, like you go stay at like Grand Wailea in Maui, right? Whereas instead of having like a hotel room, you get an entire house. And
Yeah.
so they've got like their own cleaners on site, which obviously you pay quite a high management fee in my personal opinion, but um, the nice thing is literally it's hands off. I don't even have to think about anything ever, and they just take care of it all.
Yeah. Oh, that's super nice. That's way cool. What about, I was just curious with someone that booked in April already, which it's October, I don't know, they must have booked it like October 27th or something of 2022. And like, when do you realize that money? Do they already pay or they just put a hold on it? At what point do you have a cancellation cutoff?
So to be completely honest, I don't know the full cancellation policy.
Yeah.
I do know like if somebody booked like in April, I can't go now and book my own place, even though it's mine. Like it's relinquished to them, right?
Mhm.
So from what I understand, and like I said, we're so new to this, so I haven't really seen the whole flow. We've got our first statement at the beginning of this month for like the last 2 weeks of September. And so, from what I understand, it's like once they close out the month, whatever earnings we had for that month, minus the expenses of everything that's going on, we would then just get a direct deposit at the end of that month after the person would have stayed there.
Yep, that's cool. And then say you don't, this is like maybe too specific, so I'll back out of this one after this question, but say you don't rent it at all for 1 month, like January. Are
Yeah.
you still on the hook for paying the management fee, even though you like they aren't managing any bookings or anything?
Yeah, great question. So there's a lot of fees actually. So it's a 35% management fee, which for those of you guys watching that are in the short-term rental space, that's very high. So it's a 35% management fee, but that is taken out of whatever the nightly rental is, right? So like if no one books, there's 35% of nothing is nothing, right? So I don't pay
Yeah.
anything.
Okay, that's
However, there are other fees part of being in that community, which I think is kind of like lean towards something that I probably should have done a little bit more due diligence on. And maybe like probably like the only angle that is like a little bit negative of doing the short term rental side of things. But they have an HOA fee. They have what is called a resort fee, just so that people, when they go stay there, they can actually use the pool and everything. We have a private hot tub in our backyard. And so there is a monthly hot tub cleaning fee. And
Mhm.
then there is this one I had no idea until about a week ago. It's a technology maintenance fee, which is basically their booking software, because you can either book directly through this resort's like site, or you can book it. They also have it listed on Airbnb and VRBO. So you can book it
Mhm.
on any of those, but they have their own booking system. So that's basically like they're charging a monthly software subscription to all the owners. So yeah, so I mean, even if you don't book it out, you still have all those fees, and then obviously taxes, mortgage, all that fun stuff that if you took out a loan.
Yeah. Okay. So you're able to choose a market based on something that has low seasonality and it's close to you, so you can access it when you want. But how did you choose like how big the house? Well, I guess how big is the house? Is it like 3 bedroom, 2 bath? And what were you looking for? Or you're kind of like, I wasn't looking for anything, I was just looking for what felt like a good deal.
Yeah, great question. So the house is 5 bedrooms, 5 baths, almost 4,000 square feet. So decent size house.
Yeah, that's huge.
Um, it's yeah. So to be completely honest, I was looking for something. I knew it was probably not going to be the best ROI of an investment,
Hmm.
but I also looked at it like, okay, my family's going to be using it. We're going to be enjoying it. So I don't want something necessarily that I'm like getting 15, 20% ROI and that's my only focus. I'm like, I want to get like a return, and I want to be able to like, have other people want to stay there. But also I want to be able to go down there and stay there if there's like an empty night, or if there's a time that like we want to do a little like last weekend we did a little family get together. Super fun to go hang out and have extended family come down and hang out. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question in a great way, but the main benefit too is just like the tax benefit and being able to like leverage cost segregation, basically be able to depreciate the value of the home against my income, be able to get that tax benefit. But then also like one thing I always kind of look at when I'm like buying real estate is I feel like if it's something I would enjoy and I think is going to be nice, I think somebody else is going to enjoy and think it's going to be nice. So
Yeah.
then like whether, I'm doing like a short-term rental and renting out on a nightly basis, probably someone else is going to want to do that if I'm like, oh yeah, this is sweet. Or if like I'm buying like, for example, my primary residence and I'm like, okay, this is a sweet house, like more than likely the resale value is going to be good because somebody else is going to be like, oh yeah, that's a nice house. So that's kind of another thing I think about in the back of my head.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think you touched on something that would be interesting to dive in deeper, but you talked about the taxes and depreciation. I guess, what do you feel like are the tax benefits, or like tell me more about the tax side of things when you're thinking about short-term rentals from your perspective?
Yeah, so I have an online business for those guys who don't know, and I was just like starting to get to a point where I'm like, okay, I need to get probably a better tax strategy in place as opposed to just doing my thing. And so I hired some CPAs. They're actually the guys that do all of Robert Kiyosaki's taxes and everything and tax strategy. And so I want to be like, okay, like what should I be investing my money into, right? Because like that's kind of the whole goal is make money to then take that money, invest it, and invest it in a way that you get returns, but then also can lower your taxes as much as possible if there are tax benefits. And so they looked at everything that I had going on, and basically the best solution for me personally, this is not for everyone, but for me personally, was getting into short-term rentals. And that is because they said if I can spend 500 hours or more per year working in my short-term rental business, so finding properties, like managing property, like going down, like checking out on the property, all that stuff, then I could actually depreciate, it's called cost segregation, a certain percentage of the value of the home against my active income, right? So just like for easy math, let's say I made $1 million, right? And let's say the house was $1 million. Just keep math super simple. So if the house is $1 million with cost segregation, basically you can get like a detailed cost segregation analysis done. But just like if you don't have one of those done, basically what they do is CPA says, okay, they use the 80-20 rule. 80% of the value of the $1 million is considered the house, right? And 20% is considered the land. And land you can't depreciate because land is just land. And so what they do is they say, okay, 80% or 800,000 of the million, we can go through and that will be a depreciating asset because as years go on, you're building, you got to fix your roof, you got to fix a heater, this or that, different things. And so what you can do is year one, and I know I'm getting in the weeds here, but year one, you can depreciate 30% of that 80% against your active income. So if you made $1 million in a year, once again, easy math,
Yep.
and you had $1 million property, 80% of that would be 800,000. 30% of that to be able to depreciate year one would be 240,000. So basically you'd be able to say, hey, $240,000 of this property is considered an expense. Yep. And so you take $1 million minus the 240. So now your income, you're only being taxed on 760 as opposed to the $1 million. So
Dang. No, that's great. And that's only, I'm sure there's a lot more to the tax strategy because that is a short term, like that's something that you can realize very short term, like within 1 year. Because when I'm usually thinking about the tax side of it, I'm like, oh, well, it's so nice because eventually I'll be able to sell this and 1031 into more real estate. And that's where I really think about the tax advantages normally is on the more like 5 to 10 year, like flipping it in the future.
Yep.
That sounds like a super cool one that happens. Like,
well, because if you think about it, so let's just go with that exact example. If you're being able to expense $240,000 off of the $1 million of income, and if you're making $1 million, you're basically paying roughly 50% in taxes, right? 40% federal plus whatever state tax, maybe a little bit less than that, but let's just say 50% for easy math, like we're using here. That's $120,000 in tax savings, right? Which if you put, let's say 20-25% down, 120,000, it's almost half your down payment right there, right? and
Yeah.
it's you're able to use that down payment for the tax savings. Basically, it becomes that, or it's basically like, okay, what are the monthly expenses of the property? How long is that? Anyway, you can just see kind of how that really starts to compound there.
And then, not to get into the weeds even more here, but what is the tax on passive income then for you? Because you obviously have your normal earned income. And then I just found this out, which I didn't know, because New Hampshire has no state income tax, but they do have a
Mm,
5% flat tax on dividend. I think it's like passive income earnings. Apparently, they have
mm,
5% flat tax. So I think that's like the only true way to tax the rich, because it's not like you're going to take like a $1 million salary. You're going to take like a $200,000 salary and then give yourself a ton of stock options or whatever, and then pay out a dividend, and so that you're not getting taxed at this super high rate, essentially. So I guess, do you know what the tax implications are for that? Is it, I mean, I guess I'm seeing it as passive income, or is it not passive income because you're putting 500 hours into it?
yeah, so that's the interesting thing. So it actually is not passive for me
Okay.
because I am putting 500 to make it active to be able to depreciate against my active income.
Okay.
However, if let's say in 2-3 years from now, I'm like, hey, I don't want to do like the active 500 plus hours. Well, I just don't do the 500 plus hours. And then that will by nature just become passive to me. So it can in future years, because that was one thing I was actually super worried about. I'm like, I don't want to be like continue buying properties and like I'm literally putting nothing into the passive income bucket. And then my CPAs were telling me like, well, if in 5 years you wanted to stop doing this, you could just stop putting 500 hours into it and it would transfer into the passive income side of things, which at a maximum tax bracket, at least federally, from what I know, is 20% versus where, on the active side, it's almost 40%. So it literally cuts your tax in half.
Got it. Got it. Well, what would you say is kind of coming out of the tax world now? Because we got in a little deep, but what would you say is the best part of owning a short-term rental so far in your early 6 weeks? If there is even a best part yet, I'm guessing it's been pretty stressful up to this point.
No, it honestly hasn't been crazy stressful. I mean, getting the loan, all that stuff is, a lot of work and just like, kind of just the initial like closing part of it. Best part is we've already been down there twice in the last 6 weeks as a family. And so I think that's been a huge benefit of like what I was talking about earlier of like getting a property that's close enough that you can just like pop down there for a weekend. Cause if it was like Daytona Beach, I don't see like us just popping over there in the last 6 weeks. Whereas, we went down there for the weekend to go close and sign on the property. And then we just went down there this last weekend. And, it's just like, it's much easier to just like throw everyone in the car and, hey, we're heading down for 2-3 days or whatever it is.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. What is the worst part or something that surprised you up until this point? I know you kind of already mentioned expenses and you wish you did more due diligence, but maybe that's the answer.
Yeah, honestly, that's it. I mean, it's just all the fees because like I was initially just kind of calculating in, okay, mortgage payment, how much is that with taxes and all this stuff. And then, you like, I mean, obviously this is my first time as being like more of a real estate investor. And I kind of compare it to like my first time starting an online business
Yeah.
where it was a lot of great experience, not necessarily the most profitable thing in the world, but I was able to like learn and grow from it. Which I think that's going to be how this property is. I mean, honestly, I don't think it's going to be crazy profitable. I mean, there's going to be lots of tax savings. Hopefully we get some appreciation, which you should never just like hope and pray for the appreciation. I mean, luckily I didn't like overextend myself, spend my last dollar on it and like basically, living paycheck to paycheck. But I'm just like looking, I'm like, man, all these fees and oh yeah, I forgot we're paying utilities and like, oh yeah, and this and that. And the technology maintenance fee. And then, oh yeah, it's almost $200 for somebody to come clean a hot tub every month. And I'm like, wow, like it adds up quite a bit really fast.
Yeah, I'm sure you have one of the cleanest hot tubs in the game.
Well, the ironic thing is both times I've been there, it's been dirty and I've had to get mad at them because I'm like $200 a month for a dirty hot tub and it's not even hot. We got to talk about this.
That's unacceptable. That is,
I know, right?
yeah, that honestly is so crazy. That's super frustrating. I guess, to kind of close it out, what would you say if someone's watching this? even me, it's like, hey, you're doing your first short-term rental property. What's like the key things to like keep in mind if you were to like sum it up in a 1 minute type summary?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you want to get in the short-term rental game, and let's say if you want this to be like your career and you're, let's say you're young and hungry, don't really have money, I think the easiest way is just like go start managing properties. You don't have to buy one. And look, like my management company's taking 35%, right? So you can make, you don't have any skin in the game as far as like capital down or anything like that, but you can easily collect 20, 25% and get the idea of the ins and outs of the workings of an Airbnb, a short-term rental, and really understand it, and then start building up money to be able to invest in your own. So if you're on that angle, I would say that. Number two, if you already have money and you're like, hey, I'm just looking for a place to invest it, I just say like, what are your goals? Are you looking for like just purely ROI? Or is it something like kind of like how I am, where it's like, yes, I want ROI, that'd be really nice, but also I want to enjoy it as like with my family. Then you kind of like look at those places. Okay, where do you like to go? Where do you like to visit? What is a place that like, it's not going to be just like maybe 1 or 2 months of the year that are like going to be super hot, but like even ski towns, people go there and ski during the winter. Yeah. And then they mountain bike and hike during the summer. So there's only like a few months that are kind of like the dead months, where it's like April or October, November, that it's kind of like a little bit, the shoulder months like you were talking about. Yeah. So anyway, those are kind of some of the thoughts that I would suggest and recommend as somebody just looking to get into things.
Cool. I love it. I think that is some great advice that I'm taking mental note on it right now, for myself. But I do think that is super cool. As I look at like staying in like short-term rental places that I stay in, I definitely think that's true. It's like there's a lot, the mountain biking, the skiing, it just depends how you look at it. There could be a need like year round. But
Totally.
anyway, with that, dude, thank you so much for coming back on the show. If the audience, if you have any questions for Jason, you can find him over on his YouTube channel. Also, if any incredible questions come up in the comment section, I'll ping you and let you know if we need to find an answer to it. But thank you so much again for coming on the show.
Perfect. Well, thanks for having me, man.